Empowerment Show aims to equip individuals with the necessary tools, knowledge, and confidence to make informed decisions and take control of their lives. It also focuses on ensuring access to essential resources and the opportunities.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the Empowerment Show. This is our Tuesday, and Tuesday I like to get into it with my man Ronald Yates. Now, Ronald Yates is he's a member of Genesis Radio. He has his own show, and it's called Reasons for Reasons. So Thursday nights, 6 o'clock. You're not doing anything, tune in. He's got a lot of things to talk about. So, with all that introduction, what's happening, brother? How you?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing better than I think a country is right at the moment.
Well, yeah, the country's got some pretty serious issues. In fact, across the globe, we have some pretty serious issues. Since we are integrated economy now, as the U.S. goes, so goes the rest of the world. So if Trump's economic policies are not good for us domestically, they're not good for the world.
Well, it seems like, from what I've been hearing, everything that he's been doing is kind of really destroying the world, if anything. But we got a lot of trade wars going on now because of these tariffs. I mean, because of these tariffs, him and his boy, they're bromates. They're not going to be buddy buddies for too much longer. I think you predicted that one time ago that they would actually have a fallout when it starts to come to that money, and that's what it's coming down to because Musk. He's losing a lot of money every day, and I don't think his stockholders and his shareholders are very happy about that.
Well, I think they've asked him to step down. Uh, I think he was the chairman of the board of Tesla, and I think he's been asked by the shareholders to step down because Tesla stock is down sharply. And it is because he stepped away from the company, is not managing the company right now, and is engaging in politics. Politics that, for the shareholders, is detrimental to the company. You're sitting there with a man who is placing tariffs on countries that Tesla does business with, a lot of business. Say, for instance, China. One of his largest plants or assembly plants is in China. So they're watching the stock dropping every day. So, they decided to make a change.
Well, on the world stage, he's making a hell of a change, and it hasn't been a good one. It seems like these tariffs are really, really affecting a lot of other countries. Now, he tried to come on and say that a lot of other people have folded in, but I don't see that. What I see is that a lot of other countries they're not taking it from him. They're not going to take his bulliness. They're not going for it.
Well, I think the countries he's talking about, and I saw a report that up to 50 companies, I'm sorry, 50 countries have agreed to meet with him. Now, these are probably the smaller economies that depend heavily on the U.S. For their own survival. But the larger uh, economic powers are not bowing to Trump. China, Japan, the European Union, they're not bowing and they're not backing down. Um, for Trump, there's a scripture that says there's nothing new under the sun. It's all
Hmm.
been done before. And what Trump is doing is something that this country did after World War One. This country became isolationist, did not want to be involved in, foreign conflicts, wanted to have an America first, I guess, posture. And this is the same thing that Trump is doing now. But those isolationist policies, they were not good for the country.
Hmm.
Um, they were not good for the world, for that matter. If the U.S. and the other countries, I should say the European Union, if they had intervened and what was going on in Germany, they could have prevented the rise of Hitler in World War II.
Hmm.
But the U.S. was not interested. He said, we don't want to get involved in Europe's wars anymore. We're Americans, and England was, of course, the colonial power that controlled this country. So they're like, that's their situation, not ours.
Hmm.
Let's just stay out of it. Well, now, all these years later, as I said, it's an integrated global economy. So if we're going to be isolationist, we are hurting American businesses, particularly the farm industry. And sadly, in this country, we've lost our manufacturing base. Most of those jobs and those companies folded up and went overseas. Trump thinks he's going to bring them back, which is interesting because he said in his first term that he was going to bring manufacturing back to America. Well, in 4 years, in the first Trump term, how many companies actually came back to this country and started hiring people?
Well, I could tell you this, brother. With as far as that Trump situation and bringing manufacturing back to this country, even if they brought manufacturing back to this country, the American people would not be able to afford their products and goods and services. It would cost too much money to manufacture here in America, and then it would cost the consumer because everything would come down to it's going to be put on the consumer. That's where everything is going to be put onto.
Well,
So
I think
he's not helping us. He's actually hurting the American people and everyone else across the world.
I think it depends on what we're manufacturing. Um, if you remember, during the pandemic, we did not have PPE, personal protective equipment.
Right.
Down in the southern states, there were a number of plants that produce things like masks, gloves, bandages, the gowns, right? It doesn't cost much to manufacture that stuff. I mean, essentially paper products. Doesn't
Mhm.
cost much. And those products would be the main consumer would be hospitals and a medical establishment, right? But the fact is, you might be able to make those cheaper because you got to figure the import cost to import them from around the world. So on the labor end, you save some money because you're not paying much overseas, but then you have to pay the import tariffs when they come into the country.
Well, those
And
taps go, that taps, they go both ways, man. That door swings both ways, the tap. I mean, if they put taps on us, we put taps on them. But this guy is talking ridiculous type of tax. I was listening at one point, he's talking about putting 100% tax on a particular country. I think China or whatever, but 100% tariff?
I think the two highest are China and Vietnam in terms of tariffs. So what a lot of people are saying is a lot of political pundits, and I will say, in fairness, a lot of, I guess, left-leaning political pundits are saying that what happens is by Trump putting on these high tariffs, all you're doing is creating more opportunities for China, right? Um, China probably has surpassed us in terms of being the world's largest economy. And the Chinese are basically everywhere, all throughout Africa, Europe, of course, Asia. And right now, China controls about 70% of the world's rare earth minerals, which are vital to all major economies, right? And one of the reasons Trump wants Greenland, because Greenland has, a vast array of these minerals. But other countries like Denmark that controls Greenland has tried to get access to them. But Greenland, most of the year, is covered in ice, very, very thick ice. It's almost impossible to get down to the layers in the soil where these minerals are. But that's the real reason why Trump wants Greenland, not just for strategic reasons. It's because of the value of these rare earth minerals and ongoing competition with China. And again, if you're not going to trade with some of these countries, well, China will step in and say, well, we'll trade with you. And even the European Union is saying, well, if the United States doesn't wish to trade with us, we will trade amongst ourselves. Instead of shipping stuff, across the Atlantic, we'll just work within the framework of the European Union. And just think about how much stuff that we consume on a daily basis that comes from places like China, Vietnam, Cambodia, places like, within Europe. If you just look around your house, just look at some of the labels, it tells you where everything comes from. I mean, the hats Trump has been selling, the MAGA hats, they're made in China. Same thing with his ties he's been selling, made in China. His sneakers that he was selling, where do you think they were made?
Seems like everything pretty much that we have in this country is made in another country. And this is why I don't believe that manufacture is really going to come back to this country. I think it's going to cost the American people way, way too much money. If it did, we wouldn't be able to afford anything here. And what's happened to our trade agreement? I listened to Trump. Trump said that the trade agreement is a lousy trade agreement, but it's the one that he made. He made that agreement the last time he was in office.
Well, he might have been talking about, because they said that NAFTA, the original NAFTA agreement, which I think was signed under Clinton, it hurt the U.S. trucking industry and a few other industries in this country. Then there was the successor agreement, CAFTA, right?
Uh-huh.
Which also hurt American workers, right? But I think we have to keep in mind that our government isn't necessarily on our side as it relates to working class and poor people in this country.
All right.
I don't care what party you affiliate with. The fact of the matter is, these parties are bought and paid for. Each day, hundreds of millions of dollars pass through Washington in a form, from lobbyists, right? Who are going down to Washington to lobby Congress, for favorable legislation. And when you think about somebody like Trump, I think you have to ask a basic question. Is Trump a president? Right? Now, what I mean by that is, in this country, we were told this country's a democracy. I don't know if it's ever been, but certainly now you have to ask the question, if we were a democracy, are we still one?
Hold on.
Does
to that
Trump
one
view
second.
himself as a president, or is he something much different? Because if you think about it, he's in control of the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislature.
Well, over the weekend, you had about 50 states, and they had these big protests, trying to let everybody know that the power is to the people. Now, the power so much is in the hands of the people. If you look what happened in New York with Elon Musk, with the Tesla, they had to end up closing up one of his businesses, which cost him a lot of money. So that was due to a lot of the protests. In other words, the power is in the people's hand. And we're going to hold on to that. I have to do a little commercial break and be right back. Is that what they mean when they say that youth is wasted on the young? My Lord, did you see those people in that commercial, that Wolfpack commercial? It made me want to go, oh,
Yeah.
It reminded me of some back in the day stuff,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I was telling you about the protests. I actually attended one of the protests over the weekend. People are very, very, very upset. And like I'm saying, the power is in the hands of the people. Now, I'm hoping that the next time we have a round of voting, that people will kind of listen to other people like Kamala Harris, because I heard her the other day. She didn't say it, but it was pretty much, I told you so. I told you that these was going to happen. So maybe next time around, people will actually listen and take note to what's being done around them, instead of just using their moral compass to decide to make a vote.
Well, I'll tell you something, right? Going back to what I was saying about a democracy. For years, presidents have been taking more and more power for themselves, right? That the president has become pretty much the central figure. Well, right now we have a president that, or if he can still be called a president, because what he's doing is he's ruling by decree, which is something the king did. Well,
Hmm.
instead of using the term decree, today we're using the term executive order, right? But that skirts our Constitution, which gives all of the power to Congress and to the states. Well, he's not consulting Congress. In fact, he does not have the authority under the Constitution to institute tariffs on anybody,
Mm.
on any country, but he has control of Congress. There was a young man from Maryland that was deported illegally, sent to this death camp that they call a prison in El Salvador.
Yeah.
Well, later they admitted, oops, he was sent there mistakenly. Yet the Supreme Court is blocking his return.
Mm.
So Trump is in control of three branches of government. That's not the presidency.
Did it make it to the Supreme Court? I didn't think it made it to the Supreme Court as of yet.
It has. It
And
has.
they've already ruled on it?
They've already made a decision that he's not going to be returned, at least not right now. And also that Trump can continue these deportations, that the lower court's ruling is basically been overturned. So Trump is going to continue to send people who are not from El Salvador to El Salvador.
Now,
So,
Congress must be down for this because somebody's got to be paying for this.
well, the U.S. government is paying for the U.S. government is paying for the detention, right? Because El Salvador is not going to take these people unless they're going to receive some form of, remuneration. So they're getting paid for each prisoner that they house. So for them, it's a windfall. But for the people of this country, it's a tragedy because we don't know who these people are. They're nameless and they're faceless, right? We know of one that the government has admitted, oops, we made a mistake.
Mhm.
And yet no one is taking the proper action to bring him back. It's the most dangerous prison in El Salvador. And I think what we as people born in this country need to be cognizant of, if they can send people here or to El Salvador who are legally in this country, say work visa, student visa, why can't they send an American, somebody born and raised here, to El Salvador? What's going to stop them?
Mm.
Because yes, you have the right to due process. At least you had that right under the Constitution. But if we're no longer democracy, then what rights do we have?
I didn't know we were still a democracy. And as far as I agree with what you're saying, I always said that with that mob mentality, they don't see, they don't care what you are. If you look Spanish, speak Spanish, it's the same thing with Haitians. I mean, I could be walking down the street one day and they could just snatch me up and decide that, hey, we're going to ship you off to Haiti. I've never been to Haiti. I'm not from Haiti, and no matter what I say, they're gonna end up doing it anyway. So with this mob mentality, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. When they're ready to snatch you up, ICE comes along and slides in. They're gonna wrap you up and they're gonna take you off either El Salvador, which's got to be one of the worst prisons in the world. And I understand those people over there. They're going over there to do slave labor. They're going to be their work camps.
Yeah, I'm sure that there may be some people in this country who may be receiving some financial benefit by having these people working over there. I mean, what are they getting paid? Nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, a lot of people may not know it, but sometimes you get these calls from these telemarketers. A lot of people may not know this, but a lot of these telemarketers are guys who are imprisoned. The major corporations use the prison labor because what they pay them 11 cents an hour.
Mm.
So for them, again, it is a windfall, right? You have a guy who's going to be a telemarketer 8, 10, 12 hours a day for 11 cents an hour. You
Mm.
don't have to provide health insurance. That's on the state. You don't have to feed them. Just give them 11 cents an hour and they sit there all day in front of a computer and make calls.
Now that's probably one of the good jobs there. Probably exaggerating about the type of work that they're going to be doing, because I don't think they're going to be sitting behind any computers. But
Oh, they
have them
are.
out there. They may have them out there in the fields working too.
Oh, no, they work at the computers. These
Mm.
calls are actually from a correction facility, right?
Mm.
Because a lot of the information that will be on the screen may not be anything that is detrimental to the consumer. I mean, we don't know for sure, but yeah, a lot of these large corporations like Citibank and others have been using prisoners for some time now. You know,
Well,
it's all about
you
the
would
bottom
know
line.
probably more than I do. I mean, I've never been in law enforcement. You've been in law enforcement, so I don't want to speak on things that I don't really know about. But you know more about that. But either way, we're talking about a government structure or administrations that's willing to utilize people as slaves or for whatever they want. I mean, even down in Florida, you see they're trying to roll back the child laws, where they're the working laws, where you can have children under 14 years old, under 12 years old, they can go out and work in the fields. And you know who that's going to affect. I was just talking to Kira Bradford Gray, and we kind of got into that. Was one of the questions that I asked her too, and we both agree that the most people that's going to be affected by those type of laws are people that look like you and I.
Well, I guess that's what they're designed to do, right? Which should come as no surprise, because most of the laws in this country have been detrimental to Black and brown people from the time we arrived here, if we weren't already here.
Hmm.
But you know, this comes as no surprise, and for the protest that happened, a lot of Black people said, "We're not going out to protest." Right? That this is not our fight.
Hmm.
That this is something that we need to sit back and take a wait and see approach.
And I do not agree with that approach at all.
Well, I think that a lot of people, I'm talking about Black and brown people, have come to the realization, and I'll include myself in that, that marches have not been effective in generations. The last time we had effective marches probably was when Dr. King was alive. And we only had limited effect then, right? But now we have groups that have formed that have marched and other forms of civil disobedience. Like, when was the last time you heard from a group like Occupy Wall Street? You
I
don't.
remember that group. You don't hear from
Right.
them
You don't
anymore.
hear from them.
Right.
You don't hear much from Black Lives Matter anymore, right?
Right. Well,
Because
you know they politicize that, and then they criminalize the group. So a lot of people look at them as being criminals anyway. So
right. So once the media gets a hold of these groups, right, they shape the narrative, and they'll tell you that these groups are anti-American. They'll show you some young Black people that's maybe file footage of windows being broken and stores being looted, and they'll say this is what they do. So of course, for Caucasians in this country who have a fear of this sort of behavior, and others who have a hatred of Black and brown people, they look at that and they're like, well, there's no way we can support this. There's no way our government should be in support of this. So these groups are basically subjected to basically the same sort of treatment as, say, the Black Panthers and other groups in the 60s under the counterintelligence program. And that's basically what they're doing. It is
Well,
those counterintelligence tactics.
speaking about the Black Panthers, there was a young man, Fred Hampton, and I believe I kind of dig his philosophies because I think it's going to take all of us together. Because as long as we find some reason to be segregated and to divide us. As long as we keep finding ways to make us divided, we're not going to win. They're always going to win. The powers that be are always going to win because as long as we're against each other for some one of reason, we don't want to go to the marches because of X, Y, and Z. We don't want to participate in this because of X, Y, and Z. As long as we continue with that attitude, we're not going to win. We're not, because it's going to take all of us to win. All of us, black, white, blue, Chinese, in between. All of us is going to take. All the people that are here in America that call themselves Americans, it's going to have to come together as one America, not Republican, not Democrat. It's going to actually have to come together as one America.
Well, you know what? I think that's another reason why Black and brown people chose to stay home and not come out to protest, because what happened was in the 1960s, when we went out on the front line, when we crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge and got our heads knocked in, after the legislation was signed, it was white women, Caucasian women, that were the major beneficiaries of the civil rights legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to go out there and get on the front line, right, how does it benefit us if, when the legislation is signed, if there is such legislation,
well, just
well,
to play the devil's advocate,
benefiting?
just to play the devil's advocate, is that there were a lot of, you want to call them Caucasian, but there were a lot of people that was on that Pettus Bridge. It was a lot more than just black people that were involved. And
But
even
the bulk of them were black people.
Yeah, but even for us to what do you call it, the Underground Railroad, even for that to succeed, it took white people, abolitionists, that also helped along. So I just think that it's not so much as the bad people, because we always got these bad apples that want to be in control and they want to do these things, and they have a way of easily influencing, as you would say, the uneducated. So those of us that are educated, we do realize that in order for something to work and grow, it has to be diverse and it has to be all inclusive.
Well, as long as when a decision is reached, and if there's going to be legislation, that legislation benefits everybody across the board.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
So if what happens is that one group is going to benefit, the majority of benefit goes to one group as opposed to the other, then it is of very little benefit to us. Mm-hmm. Even under affirmative action, right? Affirmative action, they said, was supposedly to make up for the 400 years of slavery.
Well, we know that was predominantly for white women. It wasn't mostly for us.
But you have to understand that very few black people benefited. A small minority of us were able to get civil service jobs. But the bulk of us remained in abject poverty in the inner cities of America and in the rural areas as well, right?
I agree with you 100%, but I'm not going to play the crabs in the barrel. He got 10 cents more than me, so I'm upset because he got. No.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the program itself.
Yeah, the program itself
designed to give a number of people opportunities, not the bulk of us, right? Mm-hmm. And that is done purposely so that the government can point at the ghetto and say, this is how they live. This is how they conduct themselves. This is how they want to live, right? Because there's always got to be a boogeyman. There's always got to be somebody that people are afraid of, that people despise. I've watched it over the years. From the time I can remember going, as a young kid in school, we were told that the boogeyman was the Soviet Union.
Mm.
that they were the bad people, right?
Mhm.
Well, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, all of a sudden it shifted now. Now the boogeyman was the brown people in the Middle East.
Now, we've always been the boogeyman. And on that note,
No, I'm just talking about the people
yeah,
in the Middle East, the people, the Arabs, yeah.
I got you. But on that
Mhm.
note, we're gonna pick that up next Tuesday. Just where we left off at. We're talking about the boogeyman, and the boogeyman was the people out in the Middle East right now,
Mhm.
like the Palestinians. They consider them the boogeyman for whatever reason. I don't understand it myself. But my name is Kendall Stevenson. This is my brother Ronald Yates. I always like to have him chime in, especially when it comes to politics and things that we need to talk about what's going on around the world. My brother, thank you for tuning in. And hopefully next weekend, you're going to come back on and we're going to have an outstanding time. Tomorrow, I have a young lady coming in, and her and we're going to get into education, especially when it comes to Monroe County. And her name is Anna Lopez. And she is in charge of the district of the Pocono Mountain School District. So, Anna, we'll see you tomorrow. Again, my name is Kendall Stevenson. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow. Peace.